This is the second video in the Using the Magenta Suite series. This video is Magenta Forms Designer, modifying a form created in the Easy Form wizard using the full Forms Designer. The next video in the series is Magenta Forms Designer, creating the scan template so your form can be scanned in the Remark Classic OMR software. This is the form that we created in the previous video. We are now, once the form is generated, we are now in the full Forms Designer, and we can modify this form in any way that we like. Once again, just to repeat from the last video, if you want to go back into the Forms Designer, you should do that before you make any hand changes, because any hand changes will be erased when the form is regenerated after any changes you make in the Easy Form Design wizard. So, to move any field, you simply put your cursor over that area or field, and in this case it's the title, and click on it. And we can, when you see this 4-point move cursor, then you can left click and drag a field anywhere you want it on the form. And that works for single fields like this. It also works for grouped fields, and I'll be talking about linking or group fields in a moment. But you can left click and drag and move a linked field or a single field by left click and dragging to the new location. I'm going to click here on the title. There is also another move command that's also very handy if you're trying to move something a very small amount. If you click on that object and then hold down the control key and hit one of the arrow keys, down arrow, it will move it 1 pixel at a time. Left arrow, a couple of times, up arrow, right arrow. So that will work for any field or group of fields except bubble fields. Part of what Magenta does for you when it's creating a form for you is it makes sure that your bubble fields are lined up with these timing marks here on the left side of the form. The timing marks are what the scanner looks for to find bubbles, and if these bubbles are not lined up with the timing marks, your form won't scan. So you cannot move bubbles with pixel move. And if you'll notice, when I left click and drag this field, I can move the field, but every time I do, it moves it to this dot grid, and a timing mark is added where I move the field. And so anytime you move a bubble field, you will always see one of these dots in the dot grid in the middle of the bubbles. That is required by an OMR scanner. So that's how you move fields, and you can also modify any kind of field. And once again, if I want to click on the title and modify it in some way, if I double click on it, I can bring up the field properties. I'm going to click cancel here. You can also, once you've clicked on a field, you can click on the properties button over here on what we call the object bar. This bar, third bar here, is called the object bar. And let me just explain the bars a little bit. This is known as the title bar because it shows the software title and the form that's open. This is the menu bar. This is the tool bar, some speedy tools here, and we call this the object bar. And the reason we call it that is that all of the properties of whatever object you have selected are up here unless it's a link file, a link field, excuse me. So when I click on a text field like this one, these are the properties, the field properties for that text field. But I can also click on the button or double click on the field and get the field properties window. These are exactly the same properties that are up here on the object bar, but they're nicely labeled for you so you know what everything is. This is using the object bar is meant for speed users, but things are not as well labeled, so it's a little harder to tell what each button or entry will do. So here, if I wanted to change anything, I could do that. And let's say I wanted to make the title black. I'm going to click on the arrow over here next to color, and we're going to make that area black. Okay, and when I click OK, then whatever changes I made will be reflected in the field once it's changed. But once again, I can also go up here and change things. So let's say I wanted to make the title bold. I could click on the bold key here, and I would get a bolded title. So that's the way that you can modify any object by just clicking on it. Now you'll notice that when you click on different objects or double click on them, the number of properties can change rather dramatically. For a graphic, the only real field properties are the field name, which is in this case is not terribly important, and the file that the graphic came out of. So that is all the properties there are to a graphic file. So that's why you don't see very much up here on the object bar. I'm going to click cancel here. So when you come out of the Easy Form Design Wizard, a lot of the fields are linked, and I'm going to go over here to explain some of that here with our ID number. When I click anywhere on this ID number, instead of the individual field that I'm clicking on showing up like the text here or a box or some shading or a bubble field, all I get is one set of these handles or field markers which show me that something is selected. The reason for that is this whole area is linked or grouped. We call it linked. I can't change anything in a linked group, but I can move it. So if I left click and drag it up, I can move it. I can move it back down, but I can't change anything. The only way you can change something is to unlink a group. And you can do that simply by going up here to the object bar. Whenever you see this unlink selected fields button, that means you have a link selected. Even if you have other things selected, you have a link selected. You can unlink it this way. You can also go to Format and Unlink Selected Fields. And what you can do is click on it, unlink it, and then you can modify pieces. So if I wanted to, let's say, once again, let's change the title to a black color instead of the 50% red that it's set to. I can do that. If I wanted to click on this box here and change something about the box, maybe make it heavier and maybe make it darker. Let's make it to 80% red. I can do that. Okay. One thing you never want to do with any bubble field is if I click on the bubble field here and I can change the color, you never want to do this. You never want to make a bubble field black, okay? And if you do, you will get a warning like this. Black or grayscale colors greater than 60% should not be used for response bubble fields. Okay, the reason for that is very simple. The characters inside the bubbles will pick up as data if there's too much black inside the character. That's why we have all of these percentage colors. Okay, so just never make them black or very dark. So I'm going to change this back to 50% red because that's a 50% on any color is a good color to use for bubble fields. One other thing I want to mention here, in this area we have a lot of fields, and if I want to select one particular one, it might be hard to grab this piece of shading. If I right click over an area where there are a number of fields, it will bring up a list of the fields in the area, and I have several boxes in the area, but I also have this shade area, and when I click that, it selects just that field. So that's a right click. It's one of the few uses of the right click. I'm going to try it again here. Right click. I've got a box in the area and a shade in the area, and if I select the shade, it'll select just the shade. So that is a very handy feature to know. So I'm going to left click and drag, and when I do that, I'm selecting. I clicked in the white space, left clicked and held it down and dragged it over all these fields, so you can see that they're all now selected. At this point, now that I've made the changes that I want, I can go back up here and click this button, or go to, once again, Format and Link Selected Fields, and it will relink this area. Okay. The purpose of linking in this case is to make sure that nothing gets changed inadvertently. Okay, and so it's not a bad idea to link groups. Down here, you'll notice this area is also linked. The fill in the bubbles completely box that we created, that was created for us, is also linked. So if I wanted to modify something, I can unlink it, change whatever I want. Let's make this black. just so that it stands out better. I can then left click and drag so that everything is selected and relink it. Now, with our select, anything that touches the select box will be selected. It doesn't have to be completely in the select box. So that is a very handy thing to know. So let's talk about one other thing to do with grouping, and that is the questions. Okay, down here we have some multiple choice questions and Likert style questions. If I click anywhere on this first question, the bubble field, the text, it's all linked together. Okay, same thing with the second one and the same thing with the Likert style questions. No matter where I click, all I get are one set of field markers. Down here, the purpose of linking is much more important. What we've done here, I'm going to click on this first question. I'm going to unlink it by clicking the unlink button. Notice all the different fields that make up this question. We have the question text, we have 4 different bubble fields, and then we have 8 separate text fields for the labels. To join the labels and the question with the bubbles, I link them. So I select them all. I'm going to click off over here. When you click in the white space, it unselects everything that's selected on the form. And then I'm going to left click and drag to grab all of these fields. And then I'm going to click link and it relinks them. When you link questions, the link properties window pops up. And the purpose here is to let you make sure that everything linked correctly, because if you do things in certain ways, it may not link correctly. So what I'm looking for is that my labels are in the correct order: magenta, Concord, red, blue, and I've got magenta, Concord, red, blue, and that my question text is down here. If you ever see anything extra text, that means that the software did not link the field correctly, and you'll get a warning as to that. So down here, that was a multiple choice question. In the Likert style questions, the same thing applies. We can unlink these fields and then everything becomes the separate fields. Now notice one thing that happened here. The instructions that we asked it to put on the form and that it did put right here are not linked in, and that is very much on purpose. This is a case where if you include the instructions, you will confuse the linker. Okay, I'm first going to link it back just like it was, just to show you that the link properties window comes up. Software shows us the labels and all the questions, and everything is in the correct order, and there's nothing in extra text. Okay, then I'm going to unlink it. To add a field to all the ones that are selected, I can just hold down the shift key and click on that field, and it becomes selected along with the others. Now I'm going to relink this and show you what happens. When I relink this, number one, I get a warning that there could be a problem. Okay, and then what happens is when I bring up, when the window link properties window comes up, all of the labels are gone and they're stuck up here, and there's a bunch of stuff in the extra text. What happened was the linking module was confused by the extra piece of text. I'm going to click OK here and tell you why. The linking module is trying to match the number of labels you have up here to the number of columns of bubbles, and it's trying to match the number of question texts you have over here to the number of rows. All lines, boxes, and shading are ignored. They are included in the link, but they are ignored. So when you add an extra piece of text, the software doesn't know whether it's a label or whether it's a question, and it confuses the linker. So all I have to do is unlink this, hold down the shift key again because it will also deselect that field, and then link it again, and everything straightens out. Okay, so that is the second and more important purpose of linking. And you will find that most of the fields generated in the Easy Form Design Wizard are linked. So once again, some things are linked, some things aren't. These instructions are definitely not linked, and if I wanted to modify them, make them a little bigger, I can go to my properties window and I can make them slightly bigger, maybe change the color once again to something like black to make it stand out more. I can weight it bold, and when I click OK, it will modify that field. Okay, so that is how you modify things. And once again, to move things, left click on it, drag it anywhere you want, or use the pixel move control, down arrow 2 times, right arrow 2 times, up arrow 2 times, left arrow 2 times. So just showing you how that works. And then let's say I wanted to add some fields to my form. Okay. To add fields, I'm going to go back to the back of the form where we have a little space to work, and I'm going to show you several ways to add fields. The easiest way to add fields is to take a field that already exists. Like if I wanted another text field, I can copy this field with a very simple and handy command. If I hold down the control key, put my cursor over the field so that I get the 4-point move cursor, left click and drag, it will drag an exact copy of the field that I've selected. It will actually drag an exact copy of all the fields that are selected. So I've got this one field selected. I'm going to delete it by moving up here and clicking on the big X, delete selected fields. And I'm going to select all of this stuff here. The box, our comments box, and these two footer text, and I'm going to hold down the control key and left click, and I'm going to drag all the way down to below here, and it made an exact copy of everything. So that's a quick and dirty way to make extra fields. And I'm going to once again move up here to my big X and delete what I just created. The other way you can create them is from scratch, and this is the original way that forms were designed. You go up to Tools, select what you want to draw, and click on that tool, and then you get this draw cursor. It's a crosshair cursor, and when I left click and drag, it will create a line, and you can see when you create a new field, it pops up the field properties for you. I'm going to click OK here, and it drew a line as long as I extended it. Once something is on the form, you don't have to worry about changing it, because you can once again move it, left click and drag. With lines and boxes and shading, you can change the size by grabbing the handle, left click and dragging. I can do that on either end. And with a line, nothing happens if I drag the middle, because it's a line, not a box. But that is how you can add new fields. It's always a left click and a drag. So I'm going to go up here to the Tools menu once again. I'm going to select Box. I'm going to come down here, got my crosshair cursor, and I'm going to left click and drag. And when I do that, something gets put on the form, and I can modify it here, make this a little wider, or I can modify it up here if I want to make this a little lighter. Okay, so it's always a left click and a drag. If it's text, now here are also the same tools that are on the Tools menu in the same order. So here's the Text tool, Add Text. When I click on that, and I come down here, and I left click and drag, the software will put something on the form. I can then modify it. So if I wanted this to be a new line of text, and that's what I wanted it to say, when I click OK, that's what gets added here. Okay, so it's always a left click and a drag. For shading, same thing. Click on the tool, left click and a drag. No matter what you're putting on the form, it's a left click and a drag. That's very important, because what happens if I just click on this and move down here and left click? Nothing happens. Okay, it's always a click on the tool, move down onto the workspace, left click and drag down and to the right a little bit, and you'll get something on the form, okay, that can then be modified. That's how that is the basic way you add new fields to your form. Graphic field, click here. It's defaulted to the last graphic that we used on the form. I could select a different one by going here. Let's say I wanted this arrow, and I can left click and drag, and it puts that arrow on the form. Now, once a graphic is on the form, you can change the size of the graphic. So if I wanted to make this longer, I can make it longer. If I wanted to make it thinner, I can make it thinner. Bear in mind that Magenta doesn't do a lot of smoothing of lines, so sometimes it's better if you want a bigger or smaller graphic to do it in an actual graphic software to modify it. But you can do this. These lines look a little rough. They will look better when they're printed, because your printer is printing at 300 or 600 or 1200 dots per inch, and here we only have about 100 dots per inch. So the lines look a little unsmooth. But you can do this, maybe you wanted to put this down here, and that's a little long. And then you wanted, I'm going to click on this piece of text. I'm going to control, left click and drag a copy. And if you wanted to put this on the front, you can do things like that to dress up your form. Okay, so once again, your drawing tools are timing track, which should already be on your form. Form IDs are specialized fields for identifying your form. Responses are the bubbles, text, line, boxes, shading, and graphic. And that's basically how you modify a form that was created in the Easy Form Design Wizard. You can actually, however, create a brand new form this way. If you click on File, New Form, it's going to ask you, do you want to use the wizard? If you say no, it'll pop up these properties. These are the properties of the form. You can look at these properties and just click OK, and it'll create a brand new empty form with it. This is known as a timing track, or timing marks are the individual marks. And you can also then click on Tools here, click on a box, left click and drag, and you can build your form from scratch this way. So this is how you modify and add fields to your form. So that concludes our video for today. This was the Magenta Forms Designer, modifying a form created in the Easy Form Design Wizard using the full Forms Designer. The next video in the Using the Magenta Suite series is Magenta Forms Designer, creating the scan template so your form can be scanned in the Remark Classic software. So thank you for watching.